This was, it'd be around 2 years ago now. We had a problem with the weed was right across the lake, and it just looked terrible. And the other issue as well was that the lake would, in the summertime, it would just run dry. There was no water in it whatsoever. So what we decided to do is dig it another metre and a half deeper than the actual original depth. We got a big excavator in, 2 dumpers, and what we did was we dug it all out, and then we took all the spoil over there, which is been naturally levelled out and seeded, which you can't see now, but we reckoned there was around about 500 tonne taken out of this lake. The reason for doing it is, as I've explained, but also the sunlight was touching the floor of the lake, which was encouraging the weed to grow, and whereas now the sunlight doesn't touch the floor. And it's, as you can see now, it's completely clear. There's a lot more wildlife in there now. You've got your frogs and the toads and the ducks. So as presentation and aesthetically, it looks so much better for the golf course itself. It's something that needed doing. We golfers and members have given us some really positive feedback of how it looks. I'm going to show you the greens that have got quite severe undulations on them. We tend to suffer quite a bit with dry patch on these undulations here. For example, this one here is quite high. As you can see, the location of the course is very high up, so we tend to, a lot of the time, have high winds, so the actual coverage, the sprinkler coverage, is sometimes not great, and obviously the way the greens are constructed, a lot of the slopes are quite severe, so the water does tend to run off, but we do a lot of aeration work, obviously wetters. Sometimes we might have to come out and do the manual watering, just to keep these areas in check. On this green at the moment, we've got a granular feed that's just showing you all the, it's quite a traditional feed. It's like a 6-5-10 autumn winter feed, with a bit of sulphate of iron on there. That's where all these black footprints are from. It's quite critical this time of year that we don't put too much nitrogen on there, just to, any higher nitrogen will encourage disease. One of our main diseases in the UK is Fusarium, which aesthetically doesn't look great. Affects the actual turf surface with brown patches all over, and we tend to get it this time of year, anywhere from September, October, November. We obviously apply fungicides to wipe that out, which usually do work well. Other things we do is aeration work and lift the height to cut this time of year. A lot of the time it can be caused by high nitrogen, cooler temperatures, a lot of moisture around, but also on a sand green it can be the opposite, where you've got low nitrogen uptake and the sward is very weak, so it's not really, the actual leaf blade is not, and the tissue is not really defending itself, and this is where when the disease comes in and attacks it. So by putting on this low level of nitrogen at the moment, this will actually improve the surface and reduce the disease. But obviously this was only put on yesterday, so it's going to be another 5 to 10 days before we see any effect. One of the major things this time of year, now we're coming into winter, is to lift the height of cut. Normally, right in the summer months, we're around about 3.5 millimetre. This time of year we sort of climb up to 5 millimetre. In the middle of sort of winter we even go up to 6 millimetre. But we find that if there's more leaf blade on there, the actual disease is sort of kept in check, because the lower the height of cut, particularly in the winter, it puts the plant under a lot of stress, and that's usually when you're open to getting disease. Now we're getting into the winter period, there's a lot more moisture in the grounds, the worms appear, which the worms themselves not really a problem, it's obviously the casting which affects the play on this tea. As you can see, most of the tea is just covered in worm casts. So we're about to apply the carbendazole onto this surface. What we usually do is wait for heavy rains to come. Even though we have irrigation, we find it's better during heavy rain and apply a wetting agent, because we really need to get the carbendazole through the soil profile to work properly. Sometimes if that doesn't happen, it doesn't work very well, but most of the time, you know, it's quite consistent. If we weren't to control it, we'd obviously get problems with soil bare areas where weed wouldn't normally come in, and it obviously has an effect on damaging the cutting units. Quite a broad leaf is this Yorkshire fog. It's usually gets on areas where there's very little play, but if we're not careful it will take over the whole tea. But this is actually a tea that we use in the winter, so this will reduce the actual Yorkshire fog from spreading all over the actual tea. There is a product in the UK called Rescue which will kill off ryegrasses and Yorkshire fog, which can also be used as well to reduce it from spreading everywhere. This lake is actually not deep enough. It needs to be deeper to stop the sunlight getting to the lake bottom. As you can see, it's just covered in weed, a lot of like the bamboo, and there's a lot of the Japanese weed covering the actual water surface. So this needs a lot of extensive work on it. Initially we would cut round all the edges, but what we need to do is we'd have to actually drain the lake off to the bottom and then get an excavator in and dig it out deeper, and remove all the soil which we'd put up behind these trees up here. And then we would, the ditch over here would naturally fill the lake back up again and then just reinstate it back to its natural environment. This is an area that we're developing for, it's a turf nursery, so if we need any emergency turf repairs next year, if there's any rabbit damage or scars on the greens, tees, approaches, fairways that we need to repair, we'll use this turf from here and lift it and then take it onto the course. This area has got 2 sprinkler heads either side. It's been seeded with a traditional greens mixture, 80% fescue, 20% bent. This has been overseeded now for 17 days, so as you can see the new seeds just coming through. What we will do is we'll lightly hand cut it with a roller at a higher height to cut, and then eventually maybe use a ride on next year. But we've probably got another month or so before we actually cut it. Still a lot of work for this to grow through. It's a bit of a insurance policy really, and obviously with it being so close to the maintenance sheds, it's easy to look after and easy to maintain.